Hello, good morning. My name is Paola Cheu. Let me put the time first. That's it. I'm gonna explain and I'm gonna talk about my project, the English Learning Video Project, about everything we saw or we worked on during the classes. And I want to say that the questions that the teacher already said, for example, what did you learn from this activity and what is your personal opinion about this activity? I'm going to give my experience and my opinion at the very end of the presentation, okay? And during this video, I want to say that I'm going to explain topics about affective influences on language learning, physical and psychological factors that influences language learning, motivation. We're going to talk about cognitive styles and so on. So I hope you enjoy these presentations. We're going to start here. Let me start with this. Okay, we're going to start with a really nice and interesting quotation from Jacques Delors, which it's a person that I really admire. He's a person who has enriched a lot of education. And let's start. A broader conception of education is to lead each person to discover, awaken, and increase their creative possibilities. Thus, updating the hidden treasure in each one of us, which means transcending a purely instrumental vision of education, perceived as the way of life to obtain certain results. Practical experience, acquisition, or various capacities, economic purposes, and so on, to consider its function in all its fullness, namely the realization of the person who all of it learned to be. This is a quotation from Jacques Delors, which I really think it's interesting. And it's a really nice introduction way. It's a really nice introduction to show these topics. First, we're going to start with the cognitive styles on language learning. Of course, we have two differences. For example, language attitude and the people who think that intelligence or the G factors, for example, Gardner. According to the language aptitudes, we have, for example, two views. We have the views from Balistocks and Frockley, and also from Steckham in 1989, as far as I remember. For example, by Livestock, he thinks the attitude it was an unmodifiable variable. However, for Skinhan, aptitude is a factor involving in learning. We have four main concepts or components for language aptitude. For example, phonemics and phonetics, grammatical sensitivity, inductive language, learning ability, and rote learning. All this goes to the conclusion, for example, according to aptitude, that aptitude is an important factor for SLA, second language acquisition. It has the purpose to measure its grammatical, memory, analytical languages abilities, and the learning capacity to communicate meanings. Innate capacities, aptitude related to the rate of the learner acquisition. And it's not less important to mention, for example, that Gardner, for example, with the difference he divided in logical, mathematic, linguistic, spatial, musical, bodily, interpersonal, naturalistic, and spiritual. Okay, I think this is really important because of the enrichments. You can have a better understanding about how cognitive cognition influence the language learning. Moreover, I'm sorry. Moreover, these cognitive theories provide with a conceptual structure to interpret the teaching process that has evolved over the time. Learning theories make up a variety of sets of theoretical frameworks that often share aspects and issues as I can see, considering factors such as age, personality, and language learning process is fundamental, not only because the need to analyze internal factors has become evident in educational processes, but also because at this time for the humanity, there is a concern about the way in which human beings can access to education or to the language process, the language acquisition process itself, in such a way that it has an impact on the integral formation of students and people, of course. Okay. We're going to continue with this line. We're going to continue with the cognitive styles. The cognitive styles refers to the manner in which the learner perceives, monitors, conceptualizes, and recalls linguistic information. We have two different characteristics, the FD and FI. And we're going to just give a really small review of this. Remember that students might recognize only existing clues in learning and problem-solving environment. And for example, in FI, the students might recognize implicit cues as they work as well, okay? And ones are less affected by people around and the others no, and so on. Okay, I'm going to continue with this. We're going to give you the learning styles we have recognized, for example, concrete learning styles, analytical learning styles, communicative learning styles, authority-oriented learning styles. Remember, this has to be with both parts of our brains. If you are more kinesthetics, you are more artistic, or you are better in, I don't know, writing and creating stuff that. And if you are not, for example, in mathematics or analytical things or chemistry, it means that you have developed more cognitive styles with your left brain than with your right part of your brain, for example. And of course, the important thing here is that you can recognize that your students and yourself has different ways of learning. And in the classroom, you have to try to cover all these. So the people who are more grammatical, for example, you can give some exercises, of course, some worksheets and so on. But what about the people who are kinesthetic, who has to practice, who has to do it, who has to talk, to see, to touch in order to learn? So that's why it's important to have, for example, this cover visual learning, auditory learning, kinesthetic learning, and tactile learning. I think this is really important in our classroom as teachers to give the students all the tools we can have in order they can reach meaningful learning. Okay, so we're going to continue with the concept of for assuming an education based on competences that can impact of the professional preparation of a student so that they can perform better in professional and personal life is whispered. In this sense, it is important to point out that a work carried about Jacques Delors, who proposes taking into account 4 pillars of the fields of education to generate the impact. We refer to learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to be with others. Okay. We're going to continue with talk about above motivation. Of course, motivation is a really important influence in our classroom, in our process, okay? And we have extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Remember, extrinsic is because of the outcome they will receive by doing the task. It depends a lot of us, a lot of from the teacher, how you encourage your students to participate, you cheer them up and so on. And the intrinsic motivation is the one that they already have inside of them, okay? The enjoyment, the purposes, the age, the growth, the curiosity, the passion, or the self-expression. Here I'm gonna show briefly a nice video. My last name is Ruiz.
How do you spell your last name?
R-U-A-I-C. Okay, here it's just an example. For example, you can see how they enjoy, they smile during the activity, how they talk, how they practice. The teacher is at the very back, so me, trying to correct them. And I think this is a really nice example of showing how motivation works. Okay.
Sit.
And finally, language learning means valuing our identity, culture, and appreciate and respects others. According to all these factors, age, physical, psychological, affective, motivation, cognitive styles, all this, it goes to this. Language learning means valuing our identity and culture, appreciate and respect others. Multilingual and language learning represent a real difference in economic, social, and educational terms. I think this activity help teachers to show the students how important is English or learn another language to them. Encourage the learning of a foreign language, so English, to our university students is to create a bridge between them and other cultures, a real tool to venture into the search for knowledge and innovate and at the forefront of global needs. I think this video project really helped us to get them all these ideas together and at the very end to have this result, to notice and to be able to show our students how well is going to be the improvement they are going to have in economical, social, and educational terms if they manage, if they know each other, and if they know themselves mainly. Okay. And finally, by ensuring that more and more students choose to learn a foreign languages, we will offer in an education in a higher level, expanding the culture and the students of our institution. With this quotation, I'm going to end my presentation. If your plan is 1 year, plan rise. If your plan is 10 years, plant trees. If your plan is for 100 years, educate your children. Confucius. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Mm.